The studio never truly sleeps, but tonight it felt different. Brighter. Hotter. Tighter. Overhead lights burned like artificial suns, washing the set in a clean, merciless glow that left nowhere to hide. The air conditioning hummed steadily, yet a faint warmth lingered against the skin, the kind that comes not from temperature, but anticipation. Rows of audience members shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, others sitting rigidly upright, hands folded, eyes alert. They hadn't been told anything out of the ordinary would happen tonight, and yet everyone felt it. Something was coming. The familiar theme music swelled, confident and authoritative, then faded smoothly into silence. A red light blinked on. The camera pushed in. Piers Morgan sat behind the desk, posture immaculate, shoulders squared, suit crisp enough to slice paper. He adjusted his tie with practiced ease, a small gesture repeated thousands of times across decades of broadcasting. His face carried the expression viewers knew well, polite, composed, faintly amused, but behind the eyes, something sharper waited. He had read the briefings. He had watched the interviews. He knew what kind of night this could become. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice calm, controlled, unmistakably firm, "welcome back." Polite applause rippled through the studio, though it lacked enthusiasm. Some clapped out of habit. Others glanced sideways, gauging the room. A few faces already showed unease, as if instinct had whispered a warning. "Tonight," Piers continued, eyes briefly flicking to the prompter before returning to the camera, "I'm joined by Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, or, as she now prefers to be known, Meghan, independent entrepreneur and advocate." The applause came again, louder this time, but fractured. It rose unevenly, swelling in pockets, then thinning. The camera cut to the audience. A woman in the second row smiled tightly. A man 2 seats down frowned, arms crossed. Someone near the aisle exchanged a look with their neighbor that said, "This should be interesting." From stage left, Meghan entered. Her white silk blouse caught the studio lights instantly, shimmering with every step. The fabric moved fluidly beneath a sharply tailored black blazer, immaculate and intentional. Nothing about her appearance was accidental. Her hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Her heels clicked softly against the floor as she crossed toward her chair, each step measured, unhurried, confident. She wore a smile, small, precise, rehearsed. The kind of smile that knew it was being watched. Piers stood as she approached, extending his hand. "Thank you for being here." "Of course," Meghan replied, her voice smooth, warm on the surface, settling into her seat with effortless poise. She crossed her legs carefully, aligning herself to the camera without appearing to try. "I'm happy to clarify a few things. People always seem so confused about me." The words landed lightly, but beneath them ran a faint edge. A thin wire of tension, already humming. Piers chuckled politely, returning to his seat. "Let's see if we can clear up some of that confusion tonight, then." The camera tightened. The audience quieted. "I'll start with what everyone wants to know," he continued, glancing briefly at his notes before looking back at her. "Your departure from the royal family. Do you regret leaving, or was it inevitable?" Meghan tilted her head slightly, blinking once, slowly, deliberately, as if weighing whether the question deserved her full attention. The pause stretched just long enough to be noticed. "Well," she said coolly, "if you'd been paying attention, you'd know I left because I had better things to do with my life than play dress-up for the tabloids." The effect was immediate. A ripple passed through the audience. Muffled gasps. A few nervous laughs that died almost as soon as they surfaced. Someone shifted loudly in their seat. The camera caught a woman's hand flying to her mouth. Piers didn't flinch. "So," he said evenly, "you see the monarchy as a spectacle?" Meghan's lips curved into a faint smirk. "Playing dress-up and waving from a balcony is hardly what I'd call duty." The murmur grew louder this time, less restrained. The studio felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer, the lights harsher. Piers nodded slowly, jotting a note. And yet the monarchy has survived for centuries, he said, voice steady. Upheld by people who see it as more than theatrics. Do you believe those who stayed, William and Kate, for example, are wasting their lives? She adjusted the cuff of her blazer, movements unhurried. Not my problem, she replied. If they enjoy it, good for them. Some people thrive on irrelevance. This time the reaction was unmistakable. The audience murmured openly now. A few heads shook. A few eyes widened. Even the camera operators seemed to hesitate, as if unsure which reaction shot to favor. Piers looked up from his notes, meeting her gaze directly. And yet, he said, you benefited from that same irrelevance when you married into it. Do you think it deserves any respect? She laughed lightly, too lightly. The sound rang hollow. Oh, please. I gave them a splash of relevance. I brought color, literally and metaphorically. Gasps echoed through the studio, sharper now, more shocked. A man in the front row muttered something under his breath. Piers raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Well, he said after a beat, you're certainly not shy about your opinions. Let's move on. He shifted the papers in front of him with deliberate calm. Your relationship with the press, he continued. Many critics say you court publicity when it suits you and condemn it when it doesn't. How do you respond? Meghan leaned forward slightly, elbows resting near her knees, eyes locking onto his. I'd say people like you need to learn the difference between privacy and secrecy. She paused. But then again, she added, voice dropping just enough to sharpen the point, if you understood that, you wouldn't have built a career pestering people. The jab landed hard. A visible wince passed through the audience. Someone inhaled sharply. Another laughed awkwardly, then stopped. Piers smiled faintly, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. If that's how you feel, he said evenly, then this should be a fascinating evening. The temperature in the room seemed to rise by degrees. As the interview continued, something subtle began to shift. Meghan's posture remained composed, but the ease started to thin. She adjusted the label of her blazer once, then again. Her smile lingered a fraction too long between answers. The silk of her blouse still shimmered beneath the lights, but irritation now flickered openly across her face. Piers leaned back, flipping through his notes slowly, deliberately, as though unbothered by the undercurrent crackling between them. Let's talk about Harry, he said softly. The name landed like a dropped glass. Your relationship with Prince Harry has fascinated the world. Piers continued, eyes never leaving hers. Many believe he's changed significantly since meeting you. Some even say he's distanced himself from his family because of you. How do you respond to that? For just a moment, barely perceptible, Meghan's expression tightened. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. When she spoke, her voice was syrup-sweet. Oh, Piers, she said. I'm sorry you're so invested in someone else's marriage. She tilted her head. Are you happy? At home? Do you even have a wife? The studio inhaled as one. Piers didn't blink. Happily married, thank you, he replied calmly. But we're here to talk about you and Harry. Of course you are, Meghan said coolly. People like you always are. You need a villain to prop up your ratings. How quaint. Ignoring the jab, Piers pressed on. Many royal watchers say Harry has become more isolated, angrier, even withdrawn since leaving the UK. Do you feel any responsibility for that? She laughed sharply. You really believe everything you read in the tabloids, don't you? He's happier than he's ever been. I'm sorry if that ruins your narrative. Uneasy chuckles rippled through the crowd. So no regrets? Piers asked. No second thoughts about how this has affected his relationship with his brother, his father, the institution that shaped him? No, Meghan snapped, the edge now unmistakable. I don't lie awake worrying about people who wouldn't lift a finger when I needed them. Is that clear enough for you? A sharp gasp rose from the front row. Piers paused, studying her for a long beat, then nodded. Crystal. He glanced down at his notes once more. Let's talk about your work with charities, he said. Meghan leaned back, recrossing her legs, lips curling into a smirk. Oh, that's rich. I'm criticized if I don't show up and accused of vanity if I do. You really can't win when you're me. Some would say that's the price of being a public figure, Piers replied. Scrutiny comes with the territory. And some would say, Meghan cut in sharply, that you wouldn't recognize sincerity if it bit you. Piers lifted a hand gently. Please. This is a family show. Gasps. Awkward giggles. A few nervous claps that quickly faded. Meghan waved him off, smile snapping back into place, but it was thinner now, tighter. Fine, she said. Let's keep pretending this is civil. The words lingered in the air like a challenge. Piers smiled faintly, then asked the question that shifted everything. You've said the royal family was cold, distant, even cruel, he said. Yet several former staffers, off the record, describe you as difficult, demanding, even manipulative. How do you answer those accusations? Her smile vanished. Open anger flashed across her face, unfiltered and raw. I'd say those staffers should grow a spine and say it to my face instead of hiding behind anonymity, she snapped. Cowards. The lot of them. The camera operators hesitated. The audience leaned back instinctively. But there's a consistent pattern, Piers pressed calmly. Could they all be wrong? They're bitter, Meghan fired back. Because I dared to speak my mind. Because I refused to nod and smile like a good little duchess while they whispered about me in hallways. For the first time, Piers leaned forward. Do you believe, he asked quietly, that you ever made mistakes? The studio fell silent. Meghan blinked slowly. Oh, absolutely, she said, sarcasm dripping from every word. My mistake was ever thinking this family, this institution, or people like you, were capable of decency. An audible gasp swept the room. Piers straightened his notes. Letting the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. Meghan, he said evenly, do you care what the public thinks anymore? She smiled thinly. Frankly, she replied, I don't. The audience shifted, restless. Nervous laughter fluttered and died. Piers leaned back, jaw tightening just slightly. Well, he said softly, thank you for your honesty. The red light blinked. And with that, he added, let's take a short break. The cameras cut to commercial. But the tension didn't fade. It thickened. And as the studio lights dimmed just a fraction, every person in the room felt it. When they came back, this wouldn't be an interview anymore. It would be something else entirely. The commercial break did nothing to cool the room. If anything, the pause only sharpened the tension, like the silence before a storm finally breaks. Studio lights dimmed slightly, then flared back to full intensity as technicians scurried with practiced urgency. Audience members whispered behind cupped hands, some shaking their heads, others leaning forward with a kind of guilty fascination. A few checked their phones, already typing messages that would soon ripple across social media. On stage, Meghan sat rigid in her chair. Her arms were crossed now, a defensive barrier drawn tight across her torso. The pristine white of her blouse remained flawless, the black blazer still perfectly structured, but the ease was gone. Her jaw clenched and unclenched subtly, eyes flicking toward the floor and then away from Piers, as if rehearsing her next move. Piers, meanwhile, shuffled his notes with deliberate calm. The contrast was striking. He sat upright, shoulders relaxed, fingers tapping the desk once, then stilling. His expression was neutral, professional, but anyone who had watched him long enough could see it. The patience was thinning. Not gone. Not yet. But stretched. The red light blinked back on. The audience offered a hesitant round of applause. Scattered and uncertain, as though no one quite knew what reaction was appropriate anymore. "Welcome back," Piers said smoothly, voice measured, controlled. "We're here with Meghan Markle, discussing her journey, her work, and her views on, well, nearly everything." A few uneasy chuckles drifted through the room. Meghan exhaled sharply through her nose, lips pressing into a smile that never reached her eyes. "I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover." "Oh, I wouldn't say that," Piers replied lightly. "We've only just begun." Something flickered across her face, annoyance, perhaps, or the faintest flash of unease, before her smile returned, brittle as glass. Piers leaned forward slightly. "Let's return to your departure from the royal family," he said. "You've said you felt trapped. Stifled. Unprotected. Do you believe the monarchy itself is fundamentally flawed?" Meghan let out a dry laugh, leaning back in her chair. "You really can't help yourself, can you? Always digging. Always looking for something to tear apart." "It's a question," Piers replied evenly. "Not an accusation." She rolled her eyes. A sharp, dismissive gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the audience. "Yes. I think it's outdated. A relic. And I chose not to let it destroy me the way it's destroyed so many others." Whispers rippled through the seats like a low wave. "But do you ever consider," Piers continued, unshaken, "that perhaps the problem wasn't solely the institution, but how you approached it?" Her laugh this time was sharper, louder. "Ah. Of course. Blame the woman. How original." "I didn't say blame," he corrected calmly. "I said consider. Do you take any responsibility for how things unfolded?" She leaned forward now, elbows resting on her thighs, eyes narrowing. "I take responsibility for putting myself first for once in my life. Something you, and apparently half of Britain, seem to find unforgivable." A murmur of mixed reactions spread through the crowd. Some nodded. Others stiffened. Piers held her gaze. "Let's talk about your media ventures," he said after a beat. "The podcast. The Netflix deals. The books. Some critics say it feels less like meaningful work and more like a personal rebrand." Her eyebrow arched slowly. "Critics always have something to say." When I stayed silent, I was weak. When I spoke up, I was calculating. Maybe the issue isn't me. She paused deliberately. Maybe it's people like you who can't stand a woman in control. The audience reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs, a few sharp intakes of breath. Piers folded his hands, his gaze sharpening. "Or perhaps the issue," he said quietly, "is when control gets confused with entitlement." The temperature in the room dropped. Her smile vanished. "You'd love that, wouldn't you?" She shot back. "If I just admitted I was the villain you've always wanted." "It's not about villains or heroes," Piers replied steadily. "It's about choices, and consequences." Meghan laughed, bitter and low. "Oh, thank you, Piers. Please enlighten me about consequences. You're clearly the expert on public relations disasters." A few awkward laughs surfaced, then died quickly as the room sensed the shift. This wasn't sparring anymore. This was escalation. "I've had my share," Piers said calmly. "But unlike you, I've never tried to play the victim while cashing in on the role." The line landed like a punch. Meghan's eyes narrowed, the muscles in her jaw tightening visibly. "Wow," she said softly. "You really think you've got me figured out, don't you?" The bitter old man with his little TV show finally gets his shot at the Duchess. A collective gasp swept through the audience. "That's not what this is," Piers said firmly, leaning forward now. "But it's becoming clear you're not interested in an honest conversation." Only deflection. And insult. She crossed her arms again, chin lifting defiantly. Oh, spare me the self-righteous lecture. You're just annoyed I'm not crying into your shoulder like the rest of your guests. The studio went silent. Not a cough. Not a whisper. The camera tightened on Piers' face. His jaw flexed once. His fingers tapped the desk, once. Controlled. Deliberate. Well, he said slowly, voice deceptively calm, I think we've given you ample time to show the world who you really are. Meghan leaned back, a satisfied smirk tugging at her lips. She thought she'd won something. Piers offered the faintest smile. Let's take another break. The cameras cut. But this time, the silence after was heavier. Electric. Crew members avoided eye contact. Audience members sat frozen, as though afraid to move. Meghan stared straight ahead, arms locked tight across her chest. Piers stood briefly, conferring with a producer just out of frame, his expression unreadable. When the lights flared back on, the air felt colder. Sharper. The red light blinked. Welcome back, Piers said, though his trademark warmth was gone now, replaced by something harder. We're still here with Meghan Markle, though it's clear the conversation we intended to have has taken a rather different turn. Meghan rolled her eyes dramatically, drawing an audible reaction from the audience. Oh, don't pretend you're surprised. This kind of gotcha spectacle is exactly what you live for. I live for asking real questions, Piers replied, and getting real answers. Maybe that's because your questions aren't worth answering, she shot back. The room shifted. A low hum of discomfort spread. All right, Piers said, visibly steadying himself. One more time. You've said you left because you felt trapped. Fine. But do you ever reflect on the fact that you knew, or should have known, what you were walking into? She laughed dryly. Ah yes. She should have known her place, routine. This isn't about place, he snapped, leaning forward. It's about accountability. I take accountability for not letting that institution destroy me, she replied instantly. Does that count? The audience murmured, split between admiration and unease. And what? About Harry? Piers pressed. Many say he's isolated now. Cut off from friends, family, even his country. Do you feel any remorse for that? For the first time that night, her smirk faltered. Just for a fraction of a second. Then it hardened into something colder. Harry made his own choices. He's a grown man, not a puppet on my strings. But you seem awfully defensive, Piers observed. She leaned forward, voice low. No, Piers. I just don't feel the need to justify my marriage to you. She paused. Are you jealous? The studio erupted in gasps. Piers blinked once. Just once. He straightened slowly. I think, he said quietly, we're done here. The words hung in the air. Meghan tilted her head. Mockingly. What happened to your tough questions? Run out of steam. Piers stood. The movement froze the room. No, he said, voice cutting cleanly through the silence. What I've run out of is patience. The audience held its breath. And in that moment, everyone knew, whatever was coming next would end this interview forever. The studio had gone eerily still. Not the comfortable silence of a thoughtful moment, but the brittle, fragile quiet that follows a crack of thunder, when everyone knows the lightning is coming next. Even the hum of the light seemed louder now, the air thicker, pressing down on chests and shoulders alike. Meghan remained standing for half a second after Piers rose. Her expression caught between disbelief and defiance. The confident posture she'd carried all night wavered, just slightly. Not enough for most to notice, but the camera caught it. A tightening around her eyes. A fraction of a pause too long. Piers stood fully now, shoulders squared, no papers in his hands. For the first time since the show began, he wasn't performing. He wasn't moderating. He wasn't hosting. He was done. "You came here tonight," he said, voice steady but edged with steel, "with an opportunity. An open platform. Millions of people watching who genuinely wanted to hear your answers." Meghan opened her mouth. He raised a hand. "Save it," he said sharply. The single word landed harder than any insult. "I've interviewed prime ministers," he continued, pacing slowly behind the desk, "presidents, generals, monarchs, people who disagreed with me, sometimes violently, but who still understood how to answer questions like adults." The audience was completely silent now. No whispers. No murmurs. No nervous laughter. Even the crew had frozen. "But you," Piers went on, stopping directly across from her, "seem to believe this studio is your Instagram page. A place where you control every word, every angle, every narrative." Meghan's lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands clenched at her sides. "You want to play the victim?" he said. "Fine. You want to cast yourself as the misunderstood hero? Be my guest." He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on hers. "But not on my show." The words echoed. "I will not sit here and allow you to insult my profession," he continued, voice rising just enough to carry across the room, "my audience, or my intelligence any longer." A beat. "You can leave now." For a moment, no one breathed. Meghan's eyes flashed, fury and disbelief colliding in her expression. The smirk she'd worn like armor all night flickered, cracked, then vanished entirely. It seemed, for the first time, she hadn't expected this. Then she laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Well," she said coolly, reaching up to unhook her microphone with a sharp tug, "at least now everyone's seen the real Piers Morgan. Bitter. Small. Predictable." She straightened her blazer, chin lifting, reclaiming her posture with visible effort. The confident walk returned, though tighter now, forced. "And now," Piers replied instantly, not missing a beat, "they've seen the real Meghan Markle." The room held its breath. "Arrogant," he said calmly. "Entitled. And worst of all, boring." The reaction was explosive. A collective gasp surged through the studio, sharp and unmistakable. Someone near the front whispered, "Oh my God." Another clapped a hand over their mouth. Even a few audience members who had leaned sympathetically toward Meghan earlier now stared wide-eyed, stunned. Her lips tightened into a thin, furious line. She didn't respond. She turned. Her heels clicked sharply against the studio floor as she strode toward the exit. Each step echoing louder than the last. The cameras followed her instinctively, catching the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her hands trembled just slightly as she reached the curtain. She disappeared behind it. A door closed off camera. The sound echoed like a final curtain drop. For a split second, the studio remained frozen. Then Piers exhaled. He adjusted his tie slowly, deliberately, and returned to his seat. The familiar posture snapped back into place, professional and composed, as though the last hour hadn't happened at all. He looked directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, voice perfectly even once more, "I believe that just about sums it up." A beat. "We'll be back after the break." The audience erupted. Applause thundered through the studio, loud, chaotic, emotionally charged. Some clapped in disbelief. Others in approval. A few stood without realizing it. The tension that had been coiled tight all night finally snapped, releasing everything at once. The screen faded to black. And within minutes, clips of the moment flooded social media. Headlines ignited. Comment sections exploded. Viewers at home rewound, replayed. argued. Some called it unprofessional. Others called it overdue. Everyone had an opinion. But one thing was undeniable. What began as a high-profile interview had ended as a televised implosion. A moment no one in that studio, or watching at home, would forget. And as the credits rolled and the lights dimmed, one question lingered in the air long after the cameras stopped rolling: did Piers go too far? Or had Meghan's own words sealed her fate? That answer, as always, was left to the audience. And the debate had only just begun.